Welcome back to Pre-Consent, the history show where we examine life in the pre-contractual era. Today's lesson is one of the main reasons this history is still taught, because we recognize that the mistake of state formation was never rendered physically impossible. The mistake was not merely the use of aggression. Humans have always faced violence. The deeper mistake was allowing violence to become dependency and legitimacy, something we should never forget. Younger viewers often ask, if governments claimed authority over people by territory, where did this arrangement come from? The answer is that society started out as a primitive version of markets, and government was an innovation of crime. The state is what happens when organized predation becomes permanent and morally disguised. Ancient philosopher and economist Murray Rothbard described the process. Imagine a village producing, building families, and settling disputes through custom. Then raiders arrive. At first, they steal openly, but eventually the raiders discover that constant destruction is inefficient. If they take out all the villagers or burn the village, there is less to take later. So the smart raider stops acting like a temporary thief and becomes a permanent ruler. The raiders move into the village and promise to protect the villagers. Of course, the irony is that it's mostly protection from other people like these raiders. Then what was once called raiders' tribute becomes taxation. His threats become law. His gang become politicians and bureaucrats. His control over territory becomes sovereignty. His victims become subjects and later citizens. That was the birth of government, when the perception of dependency and legitimacy were established. Force alone is expensive. A ruler cannot survive long as an obvious criminal because there are always more subjects than there are gang members. So the crime has to become normalized. The victims have to become loyal. That is to say, the subjects must become mentally dependent. One way states worked to tie people's identities to their ruler was through official group designations, which bound you to your authority almost like another last name. This was called citizenship. Citizenship was inherited membership in a territorial institution, and people were taught to experience this as belonging. You did not choose the institution, you were born into its claimed territory, and then that institution described you as one of its people. From our perspective, this seems horrible, but people were taught to be proud of their borders and governments and conflate ideas of heritage and family and land with the state. One reason governments survived for so long was that the benefits of state power were often concentrated while the costs were dispersed. This did include favored industries and political clients, but it also included ordinary special interest groups who received services, protections, subsidies, or privileges that mattered intensely to them, while the cost was spread across everyone else. A small group might benefit from a remote infrastructure project, a niche communication service, an industry subsidy, a local protection, a licensing rule, or a special program. Because the benefit was personal and visible, while the cost was abstract and widely distributed, these groups often became emotionally attached to the state. They would then use their particular issue as evidence that government had legitimate uses. In this way, narrow dependency became moral argument for broader institution. Many people were defending an arrangement they believed they needed, even when the arrangement required violating the rights of people who never consented to pay for it. In the later statist era, this was considered normal political advocacy. Creating political benefits for people, sometimes known as rent seeking, was a major tool for states to maintain perceived dependency. Of course, there was also ordinary people accepting governments for fear of chaos and the belief that without centralized authority, society would collapse. Even when people disliked their rulers, they often struggled to imagine life without the institution of government. That is the lesson of state formation. The danger in any age is not only that criminals may use force, but that people may become dependent on those criminals and then begin worshiping or morally justifying the system that exploits them. And we have record of people saluting the symbols of government, reciting oaths, and even singing hymns to it called anthems. If a protection firm begins claiming occupied territory or threatening peaceful people, modern society does not wait for it to develop a flag or an anthem or start calling its extortion taxation or developing a mythology of public service. It is treated as a criminal organization early before dependency becomes loyalty and loyalty becomes legitimacy. The goal is not to make aggression physically impossible. The goal is to prevent aggression from becoming sacred, legal, patriotic, democratic, or normal. And that is why the origin of government is still studied carefully today. So we don't forget that organized predation becomes far more dangerous once people forget it began as predation. States can only return if people allow crime to become legitimized. Next time on pre consent, how governments finally disappeared.